After having an extremely wild night out, Lee Na-mai passes out on a bus and wakes up to find that she's the only one left on it. She trudges herself out, unknown to her that her phone had fallen. The next day, it gets picked up by some stranger. Jun-young cooks and takes a pic for the gram, and as he's about to eat, Na-mai's phone buzzes. He answers it but uses an electronic voice to ask her best friend some questions. She later visits Na-mai only to find her still sleeping under her balcony table. After getting her name, Jun-young searches for Na-mai's social media. Meanwhile, her best friend gets her inside the house. Just as she's about to relax, Na-mai realizes that her phone is missing and runs up and down her house in search of it. Her friend just sits by, laughing at her. She later calls Jun-young and he continues using the voice changer. They agree to meet at Cafe Mizzy, but in real time, he keeps trying to crack Na-mai's password. He then smashes the screen. The police discover a rotting corpse in the forest. The culprit had gotten rid of her fingerprints and belongings, and since there's been a lot of rain, there was no evidence to find. Officer Woo Jae-man finds a can of plant food and tracks it down to another tree in the forest. The tree had his son, Woo Jun-young's name written on it. He tells his colleague about it but isn't sure that Jun-young is guilty. His son had left home for 7 years, but hadn't changed his address. They conclude that one of Jun-young's friends is guilty and plan to finally declare him missing. Na-mai's father expresses his disappointment and hands her a plumade drink. Just then, Jun-young calls, telling her to pick up her phone from Woo Repair. Upon arrival, she finds her way upstairs where she and Jun-young both have masks on. He gives her a form to fill and she writes down her password. He then takes her phone to the back. He inputs spyware in it and clones it, thus gaining direct access to everything Na-mai uses her phone for. After watching her for days, he visits her at the cafe and orders a special drink that he's not supposed to know about. She makes the plumade drink and meets him playing the exact same game she was. They get chummy and her father enters. She then clocks out for the day. Officer Woo checks his wife's phone and true to his colleague's word, Jun-young had told her his new address, even calling his father a jerk. Jun-young watches Na-mai till she falls asleep and by morning he'd written down as much information as he could, from her door code to the fact that she had no roommate or landlord. He learns her bus terminals, friends, other accounts, and even the jelly company where she works. Na-mai's boss tells her that G-Market wants them to feature in their main event, and Na-mai urges her to go. She then promises to double Na-mai's salary, but makes her keep it secret. She intercedes for the others and her boss promises to revisit the matter later. Officer Woo prepares chamomile for his sick wife, and when she asks why, he says Jun-young used to like it. He then reiterates how he saw Jun-young's plum tree, and implies to his wife that he killed the victim. She's saved by Officer Woo getting a text confirming Jun-young's location. Jun-young goes to Na-mai's apartment while she's at work just to get a feel of the place. Officer Woo meets his colleague and discovers that Jun-young filed for fraud in 2019. He just bolts after this, tracking down Jun-young's apartment. There, he notices he has the same nail polish found on the victim. Jun-young returns during his father's investigation, but is smart enough not to enter. He goes around and sees his father from the window. Officer Woo records the victim's picture which Jun-young had on his fridge. He then pulls out a box containing the phones and business cards of his previous victims. As Officer Woo is going through Jun-young's jotter, he texts him and sends him a picture of himself. The officer abandons everything and begins to chase location after location from whence his picture was taken. Jun-young successfully floods his place before his father gets back and then visits Mizzy Cafe for another plumade drink. He meets with Na-mai disguised as someone interested in buying a record and then gets her to buy baseball tickets from him. He gives her his card in case she has problems with the tickets. Her father drops her off and expresses how worried he is about Jun-young stalking her, but she thinks he's just being clingy. When he asks if she carries the knife he gave her, she calls him obsessive and excuses herself. She hears sounds and immediately pulls out her knife. The stranger tries her combination and successfully unlocks it. Na-mai is ready to fight only for her to see her best friend. They go outside and talk about her living with Na-mai and then segue into her liking Jun-young. They link him to their friend Yo-jeong who works at the same company. Jun-young impersonates Na-mai, sending her father a Peepers application which he installs. Meanwhile, Officer Woo had used what was left of Jun-young's jotter to track down a victim's mother. She reiterates how Myung had met Jun-young and it's the exact same way he met Na-mai. That same night, Jun-young abducts Na-mai's father right outside his house and Officer Woo simultaneously finds 7 dead bodies in the mountains. She wakes up pretty late to find that someone had used her hidden account, Kirkin, to tell everyone that she's quitting, even insulting her boss and revealing the company's jelly recipe. By the time she gets to work, all her colleagues gang up on her. No one believes she didn't do it, especially her boss who pushes her out of the office. She and her best friend go to the police to report the hacking, but they ask for evidence that Na-mai cannot provide. She then pulls her friend away from the precinct. Meanwhile, Jun-young has Na-mai's father all tied up next to him and lies to Na-mai that he'll be taking the day off. Na-mai and her best friend head to her father's cafe where Jun-young meets with them. Ironically, he explains that Na-mai's phone is bugged with spyware and that he can't find the perpetrator. He later calls Na-mai aside and tells her that the perpetrator must have done it in person, implying that it could be her friend. She gets back in and straight up accuses her best friend, who doesn't take it lightly. She angrily agrees that she's guilty and tells Na-mai never to contact her again. While everyone is searching for Officer Wu on the crime scene, he's busy confessing to his colleague that his son is the culprit. He refuses to get rid of the footage he took the other night, so his colleague sets coordinates for Jun-young's repair shop. They get there, but it's already turned upside down. Na-mai sobs, watching videos of her friend until her phone dies. She then throws it in annoyance. Back at the repair shop, Officer Wu's colleague wants to take the case to the public so they can save Na-mai's life, but Jai-man says he can catch his son. Just then, some other cops arrive, accompanied by Na-mai. She later tells Officer Wu everything, and when he mentions his son's name, she peels out the card he gave her and tries calling the company. She discovers that he never worked there. Na-mai is so pissed and calls Jun-young crazy in front of his father. She laments about being turned into a crazy person and not trusting anyone anymore. She doesn't believe she can go on with life until Jun-young is caught and proposes that she invite him over that day. Officer Wu is down with it, but his colleague isn't. Ultimately, Na-mai turns her phone on from the bus and invites Jun-young to come take a look at her laptop too. He texts back, asking for her address. As this goes on, Officer Wu and his colleague argue in a car just behind Na-mai's bus. She gets home and dresses up. He too cuts his hair and takes off his glasses. They keep texting till right outside her place. While he's calling her, his father approaches him. He tries running but gets held at gunpoint while the other office blocks his only exit. He steps into the light and both officers begin to apologize for getting the wrong person, thinking he's someone else. Jun-young successfully deceives them and walks away. Na-mai calls the officers upstairs and tells them that Jun-young had canceled. They plan for her to use her other phone to try and reach him, hoping it will draw him out earlier than expected. Officer Wu's chief calls him, asking if his son is the criminal. He informs him that there's a bolo out on him and that he should return to base immediately. Na-mai changes her phone and gets dropped off at her father's house for safety. She checks in on her father but concludes that he's asleep. As she sinks into her bed, she texts her best friend to apologize, only for Jun-young to text her new phone. As she returns the text, she hears the buzz in the house. She then calls the line and it rings to her hearing. Na-mai dashes to her father's room and finds only pillows under his blanket. She grabs a weapon and overhears a conversation with her father playing on the Bluetooth. Jun-young then springs up from behind the couch. Officer Wu gets a call about his son being dead for a year now, but he doesn't believe it. Meanwhile, Na-mai almost attacks Jun-young, but he shows her live footage of her father. He then makes her text his father that she won't be reachable till the next day. She slowly peels out her knife as she keeps Jun-young talking, and he gives her the option to either kill him or run away. As he uses the bathroom, Na-mai comes after him with a fire poker only to find her father tied up in the bathtub. He threatens him with a knife and Na-mai gets rid of the fire poker. He makes her tape her legs and then tapes her hands behind her back. She'd promised to do anything if Jun-young lets her father go and so asks him to hold up his end of the bargain. Instead, Jun-young puts on the tap, letting Na-mai watch and wail as her father drowns. She yells and curses at him till he stops the tap, and then apologizes and begs to do anything he wants. Jun-young asks her to kill her father by herself, taping her mouth before throwing her into the tub with him. Afterwards, he finds a squeezed paper where Na-mai had told the officers that they would only communicate by phone calls. Officer Wu and his colleague infiltrate the house at that moment. Jun-young tails one of them, but before he can attack, his father presses a revolver against his skull. Officer Wu beats the hell out of him and cuffs him to a desk while his colleague rushes to save a drowning Na-mai. It turns out that the serial killer has been impersonating Jun-young this whole time, and Officer Wu continues to beat him, asking where his son is. Na-mai wakes up to see the other officer giving her father CPR, but her father isn't responding to it. In the living room, Officer Wu ravages through the killer's memorabilia and finds his notes on Jun-young, his first victim, and how he planned to make him into a murderer. He fishes out Jun-young's phone and the wallpaper is his corpse. He quivers and raises his gun at this monster but can't seem to shoot him. As he apologizes to Officer Wu, Na-mai notices that her father is still not waking up. She cuts herself free and grabs the officer's revolver. Slowly, she approaches the culprit and shoots him in the chest without a second thought. She bursts into tears as she hears her father's voice and runs into his embrace. Later on, ambulances come by to pick all of them up. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and hit that subscribe button for more amazing content.